Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. Yesterday, I made a video about the difference between social conversations and therapeutic or change work conversations and why it's so important to be aware of the differences and to educate your clients about the differences. And someone asked me, how do you, someone made the comment, um, I do engage in a little bit of small talk with my clients, and how do you make the shift from a social conversation to a change work or therapeutic conversation? I thought this was a very good question, so let me address it to the best of my ability. So, when I meet a new client, I always try to engage with them in a friendly way. I usually spend a few minutes just bantering with them and chatting with them and try to get to know them a little bit just on a human level. Uh, if they're nervous, I usually use some sense of humor. For example, if people come in and they sit in the chair and they say, "Oh, I have to admit I'm a little bit nervous about this," I usually look them in the eye and I say, "Most people do survive." And they usually chuckle up and they laugh a little bit. So a little bit of banter and a little bit of small talk, I think, really helps in terms of getting a conversation going. One thing I one thing I like to do is when they come in, I always ask them if they need to use the restroom. And I also always remind them to turn their cell phones off because over time, I've noticed that quite a few people are either distracted or they're too shy to really interrupt me in a sense. So they may be sitting there really needing to go to the restroom, so they're not listening. So to get that out of the way and to get the cell phone out of the way, to get them to spit out their chewing gum, these sorts of things also help after having done a little bit of bantering. Uh, so when we start, I usually say this to clients. I usually say, okay, so let me tell you a little bit about how these sessions usually work. I usually start off by asking some questions, and I ask people to answer them as concretely as they can. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes, especially if people have been to psychotherapy, they're used to telling stories and abstracting and going off on tangents. And if people do that, I have a tendency to stop them and to kind of rein them back in. So this is like an anchor for that. So the reason why I do that is not because I lack compassion, but it's because the storytelling gets more in the way than it's useful. I say this line to every client I meet, and most of them get it. Because a lot of people think that their job is to tell their story. So I'm kind of offering a very different framework where I say, look, that's not really what we're looking to do here. Now, but now I have permission to interrupt their stories because if you don't do something like this and you just interrupt them, you come across as an asshole and someone who lacks empathy. But if you set up that context first and you go, John, and you do this, they usually start chuckling and they get it. And now you have permission to interrupt their stories, right? The second thing I say is, look, everything we do here is based upon the idea that, so let's say that their topic is fear of flying, that it's not the plane or the trip itself, but it's how you think flying. So we're going to do some thought experiments to explore that and to help you to discover the illusory nature of that so you can have more choice about it. So by framing it like that, things get a lot easier. The main obstacle very often, in my opinion and experience, is people storytelling, going off on tangents, having theories. Suddenly they're back in their childhood. And it's one thing if people just think that that's their role, so they do that because they think it's their role. And a lot of people, most people are happy to not do that. You just have to offer a different frame. And then you have other people who just want to tell their story. And with them, you can have a slightly different conversation, which is about, look, we don't really need to go into your story for you to change. And if we do, change is going to be a lot more difficult and take a lot more time. So, do you want to pay me more money and spend more time here? Or would you like to do it the efficient way? You just kind of throw it back at them. Now, when I change into a more change for a conversation, I make sure to have that intent in my own mind. I slow down, I settle, I clear my own mind. I tune into felt sense in my own body. And I make sure to speak from there. And when I ask them questions, I ask the questions with expectancy. I pause. I look at them with expectancy as if something's going to happen. They're going to respond. And I give them the time to respond. And if I notice that they're no longer speaking from felt experience, but they're just babbling, I make sure to alter my own state and to get very centered. And I kind of use my anchor and I say, John, come back. Come back to the question. And if they don't answer my questions, I tell them, look, you didn't answer my question. I didn't ask you that. I'm asking you this. So having that kind of visual anchor, using some humor about it, and also as interrogators do, if they want someone to kind of shut up, they just use the person's first name. So if the person's first name is John, I'll just say, John, whenever they start babbling. And they go, oh, and they kind of come back. So when doing seminars, for example, I noticed that some people, they look and talk and sit the same way when they're doing change work with other participants as they do when they're in the restaurant bantering. And they're wondering why they're getting the same responses, the same talking head responses that they're getting in the restaurant, because they're doing the same thing. You want to slow down. You want to connect to your own felt sense. You want to ask questions with a sense of expectancy and give them time to respond. And whenever they start to babble, you want to hook them back in. Now, I just usually ask people when they experience whatever they experience. I don't go into stories about why. But one thing I do ask them is I say to them, look, I don't dig more into the contents of people's experience than I already have, but I never want a client to sit there thinking, I really wanted to tell him this, but he never gave me the chance, that arrogant asshole, right? So is there anything you really want to tell me that you really think I should know or be aware of about you or your life or your circumstance? And I just shut up. And giving them that opportunity often helps them having the experience of being seen and heard. Because if you don't do that, some clients, they're not listening to anything you're saying. They're not engaging. They're just waiting for you to shut up so they can tell that story or go back into their story. So you want to get that out of the way. And another question I usually ask people is there anything you wish I would have asked you? And that's a extremely powerful question. My next video is going to be on that question in and of itself. But I hope I hope these tips were useful. Let me know what you think in the comments. And once again, I see clients from all over the world online. So if you want to book a session with me, you can do so at provocativehypnosis.com. My next seminar, Teaching the Psychological Illusion Model, is online March 25th and 26th, 2023. Go to provocativehypnosis.com and look at the seminar page. And you'll see a link with information and opportunities to sign up. Hope I see at least some of you there. Till next time, thanks for listening.